it's all illusion, but delusion, that I read a lot of things because we do also a lot of research, and there is so much sugar, it's sickeningly affecting. It's just like, oh, don't worry about it. Right. Everything will be fine. The earth is going to ascend and we're going to go with it.
Yeah, I've got a few choice words for that opinion. No, I come from basically from a tradition that dates back, that's Chinese, and it dates back to pre-China, before China was unified, and it has been called a lot of things, but basically in English it's called the Complete Reality School of Taoism. And the idea is, let's not project anything on reality, let's be nice, aware observers and see it unfold. And this way it's constantly a surprise. Except then I go ahead and think around with predicting the future and take a lot of the surprise out of it. But in any event, though, it's nice to approach it just that way, and saying, yeah, there's going to be a big earthquake, and it might be a real big earthquake, and we're probably going to have 2 of them here over this next week or so. But on the whole, earthquakes don't hurt people. It's bad engineering that hurts people. So pay attention now, look around your environment, see where you could be injured if the building started shaking. Is there something over your head that's going to fall and give you a bash? That kind of deal. And take care of it now.
That keeps coming up in your reports, doesn't it? That one's not going away.
No, and that's for the 10th through the 12th, although I hear some of the actual professional earthquake predictors like Joe Berglund and others are actually saying the window extends out to the 15th, I think. But our data showed that we were going to get 2 twin earthquakes of some size, notable in showing up in the press, the global media stream, that would cause damage and isolation, and the 2 earthquakes would come in over the period of basically the 10th through the 12th. But because our data is less than precise, we don't really work on clock timing. It could be the 9th, and it might shade out to the 13th or the 14th. And now, of course, I hear that Berglund and others are saying the earthquake window really goes out to the 15th. And they're using actual scientific sorts of measurements with the proximity of the moon, the size of the tide, and so on, as opposed to our radical linguistics, which are based on an emotional change in language that we see over the internet. But we've been looking at this window showing up with earthquakes since I want to say August of 2007. So it's been in data a long time.
When was the last real big one?
The last real big one we predicted was the Chinese quake of this past late spring.
Yeah, that's right. That was huge.
Yeah, there were 80,000 plus people killed, several 100,000 made homeless, and we actually had indications of it several months beforehand. And then as we got closer to that period of time, we sent out our last warning of some urgency. I just happened to be doing the processing on what we call immediacy values, which give us a view of about 3 days out to about 3 weeks' time. And there was just a whole lot of stuff in there about the earthquake. This was before the Chinese one, and so I sent out an advisory to my subscribers, who aren't that many, but also told George Ure about it. And he posted on his site a warning about a large quake coming, and he put it out about 36 hours before the quake actually hit. And then I think we had another warning we put out about 28 hours before the quake hit. And really what we get a lot of criticism where people say, well, okay, so you tell me there's going to be a big quake, but you're not saying where or the magnitude. And it's sometimes we can actually get magnitude, and sometimes we can get misleading clues as to the where. For instance, we got it just bang on the first reports on the earthquake in Hawaii about a year ago, right? In the summer, maybe it was a year and a half ago. We had initially picked up a report that in our data that it was going to be a 6.3, and that's how it was initially reported. But some months before that quake occurred, we predicted that it would be at the 50th parallel as opposed to the 50th state. So it was just a misinterpretation on our part, because what we had was 50th in terms of the data. And it should have, been a slap upside the head and thought, oh, Hawaii, the 50th state. But we just didn't see it that way, because at the time we were concentrating on other latitude issues and just saw it as the 50th parallel of latitude, which would have placed it up in the range of Alaska. So we got that part wrong, although we got it just bang on at 6.3 magnitude. What we have now, the primary language doesn't go to the magnitude or even to the location. The primary language that we have goes towards the damage, isolation, impact on roadways, cars sliding off into ditches, loss of communication, inability to deliver food, some kinds of an encounters with scarcity because somewhere, wherever one of these two earthquakes hits, it will damage a strategic facility that produces some kind of a product, and we don't even know what that product is, but that is necessary for other products, and so there will be an encounter with scarcity that will ripple out much larger than the actual earthquake environment because it's going to isolate the ability to produce this essential component. So we might think of it as perhaps there would be an earthquake in a particular area of China that produced, green tea resin or some essential thing for pharmaceuticals, and thus a wider impact in encounters with scarcity sense would occur from the earthquake due to simply that level of isolation. So we have isolation appearing repeatedly, and the data has not gone away. Doesn't mean we're correct, but we still see in this last level of processing for this upcoming week within the immediacy data the same level and steady pattern of build that we've seen over the past year. It does appear that it's reasonably focused on the 12th and thereabouts, a couple of days either way. So I suspect that if we get through the December and we haven't had the earthquake, then we've been radically misinterpreting the data. But given all the other indications around here, I suspect that we actually will have a couple of reasonably large twin earthquakes over this next week.
Well, that's fascinating.
Sort of makes sense?
Oh, yes, it makes sense. And we'll take a break right now, Clif.
Okay.
Okay, this is Beyond the Ordinary with Clif, the Alto Report, and Half Past Human, 3/4 past human.com.
We are Beyond the Ordinary with Clif from halfpasthuman.com. Clif, did you have any indications of the Mumbai, India attack?
We get, yes, we did. We in fact sent some information off to, let's say, professional parties that are in that line of work, counter-terrorism, that kind of thing, and we didn't really report anything. We have to be very careful about what we put out for a couple of different reasons. One would be that if we were too precise on a prediction, then maybe we would invite scrutiny from an alphabet soup agency that we just don't want to deal with, and they would say, well, how did you know all of this? But we also have to be reasonably honorable and also attempt to harmonize with universe here and say, well, if we know something that could potentially save lives, then we need to pass it on to people. But this is one of those curious things about time. I don't know that foreknowledge allows you to change much at a larger level. And I have a tendency to come down to mathematics on it and just look at it as an energy equation. And if we imagine that, say for instance, that the three of us knew that a particular event would occur that would, under normal circumstances, seem to be malleable by humans. In other words, say that we knew that there was going to be a holdup at a gas station, and we were able to extract this through remote viewing or reading the movements of ants in their nest, or however, the method doesn't matter. But we were reasonably certain of this, and we'd had enough of a track record to increase our confidence. Then we have the issue of, okay, if we think we know that this is going to occur, can we affect it? And it may be that if we had three individuals that knew this and had X amount of energy, and combined we had 3 times X, or 3 times the amount of joules, calories expressed as joules of energy, and there was going to only be one robber, then maybe our energy would overwhelm that of the robber. Make sense? And we could therefore go to the gas station and prevent this from occurring, either by hanging around and just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or correct time for the robber's viewpoint, and there's just too many people around so the robbery doesn't happen, or maybe actively get involved and thwart it. Now the problem becomes very much more complex when you start amplifying the amount of energy involved with the number of individuals, bearing in mind that individuals in and of themselves may have variable amounts of energy to begin with. And I'm sort of getting off track here, but basically what we're looking at is a giant equation that says if you have huge mass of people thinking one way or perceiving something is going to occur one way, then it probably takes an equal or greater amount of energy perceiving the event going the other way in order to actually get in there and alter it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So under those circumstances, it seems very unlikely that us little guys sitting out here in our garage with our servers running, hauling in data and making these predictions, no matter how sure we are, it seems unlikely that we would ever be able to generate enough joules of energy to overcome any large type of events. So in this case, we know that it doesn't work, for instance, with earthquakes or other natural disasters. No amount of energies could potentially derail a hurricane if it was going to happen, although potentially if you knew, you might derail some of the damage by getting people more prepared. And that's kind of the approach that we take, especially with the natural disasters. If we know something's coming and you can prepare for it, then we'll put out a notice through George's site at urbansurvival.com on his daily page. And so people could get out, and in the case of the earthquake here, they can run around and bolt down stuff, take things off of high ledges that may damage them, make sure their window casings are well secured over their bed, this sort of deal. But